Hello and welcome to the MKB podcast. I am Jen Fizer, your new host, and this is my first episode as the host of the podcast. And I would love to introduce Micah and Drew Clukey of Clukey and Tebault. And I believe they may look familiar to you, or at least to Drew, as he was on a previous episode. But today we would really love to talk about business acquisitions and doing your due diligence, what you need to have in place. I know, as you may know, I just purchased MKB, and so this is a hot topic for me. But I've also been through a couple of acquisitions myself. I've helped some clients with both the buying and selling side of it, and I would love to get your two's take on what you should do. How do you set yourself up for success?
Okay.
So,
You wanna? I can dive in
yeah,
and
who wants
start.
to take the lead?
I think it was
We
kind
made
of
Drew buy into this practice, so he
that's
knows
all.
about
Yeah,
it.
yeah. There
He
you
did
go.
no due diligence though, and just blindly joined
Trust me,
and
it's a good deal.
Just bought a bunch of debt. No, I'm just kidding.
that's it.
No.
Mike,
So
are you the older brother? Or was it a forced
So I am older than Drew by 10 years.
10 years? Okay. So
Yep.
you like, just trust me, as the older brother, this is
Well, in a good way. I think Drew got into public accounting not necessarily but a little bit for that. But what was wonderful about the dynamic between the three of us in our practices, I was hesitant with Drew just because he is my brother, and Tyler and I have such a good rapport and partnership and friendship. But Tyler was the one that was like, we need to get Drew. We need Drew, and like so he pushed bringing Drew on and kind of the structure and how it all worked for the three of us, and so it made it really. I selfishly wanted Drew to be a part of it, but I think being in business with someone is harder than being married to some degree, and so wanting our dynamic to continue to be solid was really important. And when T was like, Let's go get Drew," Drew was at a different firm in town, and it we haven't looked back. So it was really nice that Tyler pushed for that, in my opinion. But business acquisition, go for it, Derby.
no, yeah. um, I think maybe even touched on this when Tyler and I were interviewed by Mills. But more along the lines of like the concept of just having a good foundation from the beginning. I think we work with so many people that are coming in like are wanting to start a business and have no idea how to even work QuickBooks or even know what QuickBooks is or how to go about invoicing people or setting up bill pay or whatever the case may be. And we give them as much advice as they want. Do they take it? Sometimes. But then you have those that like take it, run with it, and do a really good job just like operationally setting up good foundation and like principles of accounting and like getting everything buttoned up on the front end, a good solid chart of accounts, budgets, whatever the case, good financial management, right? And then those are the same people that you fast forward 5, 6, 10 years later that are like, hey, I got an offer on this business, and the due diligence piece is a piece of cake. And so the foundation is there and it's been set and it's grown with them as they've grown. As the business has grown, all those things have grown and it's seamless. Then we have other clients who maybe keep accounting on a piece of paper or a napkin,
Or in their head.
or in their head. And
Yeah.
we will at Clukey and Tebault recreate their accounting once a year, just like an annual kind of write up, catch up to be able to do the tax return. And I'll tell you what, most of the time they know to the dollar what they've made on a cash basis, which is astonishing. It's kind of like our dad, right? They ran and owned their own business for 38, 39 years and just recently sold it to our sister. And like my dad could tell you like what he's made or what he's thought he's made every single year. And that was before he really used QuickBooks. And he would just have an idea as to what his pulse was and what his cash flow was. And so I'm going through that currently with a client, and they're like, well, I know I made this last year. And I'm like, okay, well, the numbers are telling me slightly different. And when the buyers who want to buy this from you for quite a large chunk of money, they're going to want to know like what the difference is and why you think you're off from what you told them, based on their letter of intent. And so it's just interesting to see the two ways of going about it. Having a good foundation, not having a good foundation, and then kind of trying to recreate some accounting on the back end doesn't necessarily hinder them from getting to their end goal of selling and being done and exiting. but it does make it a little more complicated, and there's just more questions that arise. Is
Yeah, there's less transparency. I think I can think of a group that um, has been a client and still is a client in different capacities. But the thing that I always admired about this gentleman was he was very transparent with me that I am going to sell this business. And that was 2, 3, 4 years ahead of us actually going to market to sell this practice. It's an civil engineering firm. And what we did, it was what I kind of like, Jen, this was a client that I very much am entrenched with, but whereas a lot of the times we go through tax planning and we get to the last couple months of the year and we go into kind of planning or what tax mitigation things can we put in place to help with their burden. Um, and we proactively made a switch to, there were some favorable rules for pass through entities that are still in place. The QBI deduction is a big one. And because of him being in engineering space, that was unlimited for him. So even if he was making $1 million a year, he was still getting that discount. So we strategically said, we're not going to defer anymore. We're not going to go reinvest in the fleet, or we're not going to go give all these profit share bonuses. Like, and they still gave bonuses, but we're going to show more profit because we're going to ramp into this cycle where we're going to go to market and we want to be as strong on paper. And it worked. And it was one of those things where like they had really good books and records. Um, it took a month to go through the due diligence process with this private equity group, but it was really fun, and it was a great process because it was like, yeah, we did some owner benefit things and put some things in place. We had to explain them, but they were savvy enough on the other side to understand like those things are not recurring and those would be add backs. And so, but I think there's huge value in working towards getting to the point to be able to sell a business, and really being diligent about just ensuring you're buttoned up, like what Drew said about I know what I made in my head. Another one that I'm going through right now, on our client is essentially selling. It's not been transparent, and it should be, but it's not. And so then the feedback on the other side is, well, why don't you have these things? What? Yes, I can total your bank deposits and your spend and your credit card, but why don't you have this more buttoned up? Like, and just it creates a sense of, is it really worth what it's worth? It's like there's that. And so I think being intentional on your day to day of just running your business, and the same thing here. Verna takes care of our firm file. Like we don't, there's no, it is what it is. Be, we may choose to do some different things, but the, we know what everything is, and I could look at any moment and see where we are to the penny. And so I think that's the space we're in. But I think that there's just such value in having good internal books and records, whether you're buying or selling.
I think you've touched on some really great points here. I know that private equity, it's huge right now, right? It's probably always been huge, but right now it's kind of a hot, hot thing. Private equity is buying up a lot of small businesses. I'm seeing it in quite a few spaces that we're in, as far as like home service businesses are being bought up really quickly. When you are going through books and if you're helping a business sell, what are some of the things that they should do to get started? Like obviously we can try to go back and fix things in the past, but from like day one, if you want to sell in this year to 18 months, what are the steps that you should take to make sure that that private equity firm is going to look at you as an attractive purchase?
I I think of one immediately because I this particular person I work with on a monthly basis got feedback. He basically went to a business broker who is a friend of his and was like, "Hey, give me an idea of valuation." And one of the big things he can, now he's in a construction field, so it's a little bit different than home service. From like on a gap basis, he has some like attestation work. He should be doing like a percentage of completion, like book basis accounting, right? So every job he comes in, he should have some sort of metric of, okay, this is my gross profit or what it's expected to be based on cost. He does not necessarily do that because he doesn't want to give visibility to project management on like what the actual profit is on the job. So, and that's fine. But his main feedback was like, hey, we could probably go to market and sell for 6, 8 times what your profit is. If you had dialed in percentage of completion, like whip reports all the time on every job you have, because he has big ticket jobs, they'd be like, oh, we can add 2 or 3 multiples to this. And he was like, I didn't realize until he told me that, like I was leaving millions of dollars on the table. And he's like, so I think I've reconsidered like giving people visibility to like, the invoicing and the payables. And I was like, yeah, I would too. I'd like see if I can go back and, you don't necessarily can't do that, but, and that's obviously specific to construction accounting, right? So you can't attest to necessarily like a service business. Um, but I don't know. That's one specific caveat in an industry. But I think,
Well, I'd also say like I can think of um right down the road here, like you talk about private equity. We've seen in Northeast Florida, as there's been a lot of that in veterinary services, like your home services you're talking about, like in and the multiples that they're offering for well-run vet practices is insane. And the first one that we went through, when I started to think about these big vet conglomerates come in, and then essentially like they just reduce their margin from buying products. That's all that sort of stuff. So it does make sense. But my point of bringing that one up is just like last week they'll start receiving offers. They're using kind of like a broker to do this, but I said to them, I said, kind of the offers will probably, they're getting the same financial data. So your offers are going to be very similar. I said, for, I think the big decision is culture, because they're going to require you to be here for a period of
mm,
time. You'll take your chips off the table, but you're going to have to be a part of it. And they have such a great culture. So that was my point to this doctor. I said, I think the numbers are all going to essentially be around the same. It's like, who do you want to then be in bed with for the next, and I've seen it. The engineering, he had to sign a 5-year employment contract, and kind of there's some of that. And I think the other kind of cool thing on the private equity side that I've seen, Jen, is a lot of these outfits want you to keep some equity in kind of a little bit of a like, hey, keep this thing doing what it's doing, because then we're going to get to a different multiple with all of this under one. So um but that's been a really, it's been interesting to see the consolidation in some of those spaces, and then kind of the planning that goes along with selling an asset of that size, and what do you do with it. And then you're not taking distributions going forward. You get a W-2, and you kind of have to show up and be, you go to work for someone else. So there's like that mentality of it too. That's I can tell you, the gentleman that um, across the street from us that did it, he's having probably a hard time being someone else's employee right now. But we knew that was going to be the case. It was just, but it was too good of a kind of thing to pass on. So
Yeah, I think I've seen that happen a lot too, where the business owner now has to defer to somebody else. Somebody else is calling the shots, and you may not like it quite as much as you think. So, even though
it's
that
hard.
paycheck might make it worth it for a little while, it is different when you have been the one that has been growing the business completely on your own, like calling all the shots, everything is on your back. And then all of a sudden you've got somebody kind of like an overlord telling you what you need to be doing.
Hey,
So,
you didn't, your budget versus actual, you're on, it's like those types of questions. Like you now have to answer all those things.
yes. Yeah. So, take your personality into account as well. And if you have a little bit of like that defying authority to figuring out what the best route actually is for you, because it might not be a PE purchase.
Sure.
Um, so if somebody is going to, like, let's say that we're not going the PE route and they're just going to sell to another individual buyer, what should both the individual buyer look at? Like, walk me through what should be a good due diligence on their part, and then also how the business owner can make sure that they're set up for success.
I think that depends on the type of business, quite
Mhm.
candidly. I think that there's probably a little bit of a loaded question. Like we see a lot of private buying and selling of restaurants for whatever. I mean, you talked about coffee and that side, and um, no, like in a restaurant, you have more, in my opinion, concrete, tangible things to kind of reconcile back against. You've got point of sale, you've got sales tax returns for what's going, so you can verify income. What I find is like you get oh, well, this is what's on our tax return, but then we also do this in cash that does, and it's like, well, you got to be able to somewhat prove that cash if we're going to buy it from you, if that increases the value that much. So, um, I think that question is a good one, Jen, but it's probably very, if you're selling a professional service firm, it's, block of business, so you can see what's different types of revenue streams, whether it's recurring or fixed or just, upon completion or outstanding receivable, like those types of things. And then on the back end, verifying, is what they're putting forward on these tax returns right? Or is it what it is? And so, but then I think on the buying side, it's confirming that all those things are truly what they say them they are, if you will. And you're buying a business that has someone kind of essentially attached from it or to it from a personality standpoint. Like, do you have to keep that person, or is that person that viable? Like, can you do this business without that person being involved? Type thing. I think that's what's overlooked a lot when someone buys a business, the impact that person they're buying it from has internally on that. That's a hard thing to replace if you don't know that industry, or you don't know that. Like, we see people all the time that want to start or buy a restaurant. I'm like, that's the hardest industry, in my opinion, to be in. I mean, that is, and if you're not in the business of running restaurants, to go in and buy a restaurant without experience, it's a hard lift right there. And that's whether you are a great operator or not, that's just a challenging one to get into, in my opinion.
As somebody that has experience in the restaurant industry, I can tell you, yeah, it's a low margin industry, right? So very little room for error. And to your point, so when I bought a coffee shop, I guess it's been like 6 years ago now. It was a coffee shop and restaurant, so we did full service breakfast and lunch. I bought it. Now the price point was low enough that there was that didn't necessarily factor into the decision, but I had to look at it based purely on what's the potential of this place.
Yeah.
Because I could look at it as somebody that had ran businesses and kind of been in it. I could look from the outsider's perspective and kind of see, okay, if we change these 3 things, it will make a huge difference. So I was basing it purely off of their numbers that they were showing me. And do I think that I can turn this around quickly enough that it makes it worth purchasing, right? And spending my time and energy on. So I think that's always an important thing too. Like, if you are looking at a business and it's one thing if it's making the revenue that you need it to, it's bringing in the money, it's profiting, and you are totally happy, staying, equal to where it's at. But if you're looking at a business and seeing, if you are not trying to find the ways that it can be improved and know, coming into this, the numbers are going to be the numbers, but do you have ways that you can actually improve this business and make it different?
Yeah.
That's always a big thing to me. If you're buying it, you want to make sure that you have the knowledge to keep it running at the same level that it currently is.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
We need to have a plan for it as well.
I think one client currently going through that where they've just run it as is because it's been very profitable to them. I mean, extremely profitable with very little to no actual hands-on involvement for the last 15 years. Now they've had it for 25, 30 years. And it's now also a real estate piece component to it as well. So there's limited availability for the specific type of industry. And they've done some capital improvements recently because of hurricanes. They've been forced to. But all that being said, they've not raised base rent for this particular thing for forever. And they've still made a ton of money and are still going to get full what they asked. And, the people are like, well, our ROI is not great when we calculate all these numbers. And they're like, well, we've not bumped the rent per foot, whatever it is, in 10 years. And guess what? And now no one's in a contractual agreement. It's just a month to month. You rent, you stay there, you rent this, that, and the other. You're like, but guess what? If we raise it $1 or $2 a square foot, then that a foot, right? Then you're all of a sudden, they're not going to leave. There's nowhere else for them to go. They've acquired the market. There's really nowhere to go. So there was that immediate, they pitched the potential buyer, hey, if you just do this, which is we've just not done it. There's your ROI. There's your additional percentage that you want to get to without doing anything else, spending no extra money, simply just changing the rent agreements. And then they're like, well, they kind of immediately kick back and say, well, what if they leave? And they're like, tell me where they're going to go. There's literally nowhere for them to go. And not that you want to be in that, but they are by far, they show me kind of the metrics of other surrounding areas that do the same thing, and they are by far the lowest. And so it was just an interesting take. And I was like, yeah, I bet you would have wished you'd have done that a little bit, sooner. And they're like, nah, I mean, it's fine. They get it. The people that are the 2 or 3 buyers that are kind of deep into this get it and understand it. But it's also easier to say than do, type thing. But it's the same sort of thing, like perspective and having a good idea. They even came to the buyers with like, hey, if you do these 1, 2, 3 things that we've thought about, already got like permits in place to do this type of thing, like it could go from what we have it now to this. And so they'll close in probably 60 days, and because of some of that, right? Good concrete numbers that they've had, but also like the potential.
It does seem like there's a lot of, and I guess it depends on how hands on or hands off you want to be in a business. Because like we get asked all the time by clients that we kind of stay in the loop with of like, hey, if you see a good opportunity for a business, and I think as a firm, we have done a really good job of providing that value add service of just like last spring, I have a family that we do a lot of work for, and they have one daughter who was just graduating from college, and he was very clear to me, I'm going to back her and do what she wants to do. And she's into fashion retail. That's what the space she likes. She had gone through anyway. And on the other hand, in downtown St. Augustine, we represent a women's clothing store that does wonderful. And they came to me and were like, we're having grandkids now up in, somewhere else. We want to move. We're going to sell. So like I immediately was like, I know someone who will buy it from you. And having that value out of just simply making an introduction. Now um it took some due diligence still, but I knew it to be what it was. It was very transparent, and there were 2 people that just needed to get connected. And so I think as a firm, we've done a good job of identifying opportunities to bring people together on buying and selling things that we see to be a good fit. And I like that space a lot. I think it's extremely fun, um, and it's fun to kind of connect and find the right people and for the right opportunities.